Hey, everybody, and welcome to Adapt or Perish, episode 122, Jane Austen's Mansfield Park. But before we start 2023 with our look at Fanny Price, let's talk about our next episode. Sometimes we choose episode topics that promise nothing crazy. A couple of movies, a miniseries here and there, all straightforward, some good, some not so good. I don't think that's going to apply to our next one, however. In episode 123, we'll be taking a look at Carlo Collodi's classic creation, Pinocchio. We'll be discussing the original 1883 book, The Adventures of Pinocchio, and then we'll dive into the many English-language screen adaptations and a number of the Italian ones as well. We'll be discussing some of the most famous and respected names in cinema history: Guillermo del Toro, Roberto Benigni, Walt Disney, Jonathan Taylor Thomas. I expect this one to go off the rails early. That'll be out in 1 month on Tuesday, February 7th. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections about today's episode or any others that you'd like to hear on the show, remember to email adaptorperishcast@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, we'd love it if you would share that with the world by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/adaptcast. We've got a patron-only community and our monthly bonus show, Adapt or Perish Plus, with episodes releasing between episodes of this show. We hope you check it out. Show notes from this and all other episodes can be found at adaptorperishcast.com. And with that, on with the show, Adapt or Perish, episode 122, Mansfield Park. Hello and welcome to Adapt or Perish, a podcast about adaptation. I'm Jeremy Latour.
And I'm Ari Lipshaw, and today we are here to talk about Mansfield Park by Jane Austen.
We want to complete the set.
Gotta catch them all.
So we're doing Mansfield Park next. We had this conversation. Maybe we should have done Persuasion
I don't
next.
know why.
Well, it's because the new one just came out.
So, you can watch it anytime.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do it sooner rather than later.
Sure.
Actually.
We'll do our best.
Yeah.
We're doing our best.
But just in case anyone was questioning it, like, we're going to get to all of them.
Yeah, that's the
Because
plan.
with our new monthly schedule, like we said many times now, we just want to do the big ones.
Yeah.
And Jane Austen,
It's a big one.
she's one of the giants.
It's true.
Even though this is now where we reach the moment where I feel like we're going to start getting like diminishing returns
Why?
on looking at Jane. Well, because we already did the big ones, right?
Sure.
Like we did Pride and Prejudice. We
Yeah.
did Sense and Sensibility. We
Yep.
did Emma. 3 great books
Yep.
that are generally well regarded,
Yes.
that have been made into numerous adaptations.
Numerous.
Some of which not so great.
Yep.
Some of which very well regarded.
Mhm.
Some of which amazingly well regarded. Think back to when we did Emma.
Yeah.
Remember, we enjoyed all of them.
It was a lot of Emma.
All of
It,
them.
it was a lot.
But we liked them all.
Sure.
That was the important thing.
Yes.
So now I feel like we're starting to hit, this is the B team.
Mm-hmm.
Mansfield Park,
Yep.
Persuasion.
Northanger Abbey.
Is it Northanger?
Northanger?
I don't know.
I mean, I guess we'll find out.
I've always trusted you to tell me what it is.
I guess we'll find out.
So we've reached Mansfield Park.
Yes.
People seem to have different opinions on it.
Mhm.
I think one comment popped up on Instagram when we said we were doing Mansfield Park. Someone was like, I didn't like the book at all, and I've seen all the adaptations, and my feelings is that one was okay and the other two were terrible. It was something along those lines.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this doesn't bode well.
Great.
And then we read it.
Mm-hmm.
We watched 3 adaptations.
Yeah.
We're going to talk to you all about it today. I don't know what your experience was. I feel like this was not an Emma situation.
Right. Where we liked everything a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was the other
This
way
was
that it can go.
interesting. Well, this was interesting because there were only 3, and obviously we're going to talk about them. 3 extant versions of Mansfield Park. Obviously, it has not been adapted as many times as your Pride and Prejudice, your Emma, your Sense and Sensibility,
Yeah.
etc.
There are like stage adaptations, but we
Sure,
can't
but obviously we
can't
cannot.
watch those.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I feel like none of them were like, oh my God, this is brilliant. But like, I feel like we definitely have a lot to say about all of them, which
Yes.
is good. Because sometimes we watch things and we're like, we don't have a lot to say. And if we didn't have a lot to say about one out of the 3, this would be a very short episode.
right.
So I'm not worried that we're gonna not have things to talk about, which at the end of the day is kind of the whole point. Right. Is to watch these things and talk about them. I feel like the least successful versions, even things that we liked, are things that were just like, it was It was a thing. And I don't fear that for this episode.
No, I mean, I feel like if anything, one of the things I'm looking forward to talking about now is just how we can compare this experience to other experiences we've had with Jane Austen and with Jane Austen adaptations, because it is making me appreciate some of those more.
Yeah. All right. Why don't you do a back the book real quick, and then I will do a slightly more lengthy plot summary.
Slightly.
Slightly.
All right, so this is Mansfield Park, Jane Austen's third novel after Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice. Taken from the poverty of her parents' home, Fanny Price is brought up with her rich cousins at Mansfield Park, acutely aware of her humble rank and with only her cousin Edmund as an ally. When Fanny's uncle is absent in Antigua, Mary Crawford and her brother Henry arrive in the neighborhood, bringing with them London glamour and a reckless taste for flirtation. As her female cousins vie for Henry's attention, and even Edmund falls for Mary's dazzling charms, only Fanny remains doubtful about the Crawfords' influence and finds herself more isolated than ever. A subtle examination of social position and moral integrity, Mansfield Park is one of Jane Austen's most profound works.
All right. Well, I wouldn't go that far.
I mean, the back of the book went that far.
Okay. Well, they went pretty far.
I'm only reading the back of the book.
That's pretty far to go.
I feel like most profound is a way to describe something that isn't as much of a crowd pleaser as some of the other ones. It's like, no, this one's not
good.
This one's not a page turner.
Yeah.
It's not highly entertaining, but it is profound,
Yeah.
which means if you didn't get something out of it, the problem is with you.
It's your problem. I mean, that was a pretty good summary of the first, half or so of the book, I would say. So we have Fanny, as you say. She came to live at Mansfield Park when she was but a child. She was one of 9 children of her mother, who married for love and regretted it later. And her mother had 2 sisters. One was Lady Bertram, who married Sir Thomas Bertram, and they are the owners of Mansfield Park.
She became Lady Bertram after she married Sir Thomas Bertram.
Correct. She married well. And the other...
it wasn't a situation she was like, well, I just should,
right.
shouldn't I?
And the other sister, the other aunt is Mrs. Norris, who married a parson, Mr. Norris, and they live, at the beginning of the book at least, they live at the parsonage nearby, which is the living of Mansfield Park. There's a lot about livings in this book, and I did a little research on what a living is.
Do you want to talk about that now?
Let me talk about it when I come to it.
I just found it fascinating, so I would very much like to.
We'll talk about it when we come to it. Okay. Lady Bertram and Sir Thomas Bertram have 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. The oldest boy is Tom, who is a bit of a wayward gentleman, shall we say.
It's a bit of a charismatic ne'er-do-well.
He seems to like wine, women, and song.
Hang on. Let me take that back. He seems to be kind of a ne'er-do-well.
Yeah, he's not charismatic in the least. There is Edmund, who is, as the second son, is planning to go into the clergy. There is Mariah, the oldest daughter, a bit of the prettier daughter, a bit of a flirt. And then there is Julia, the younger daughter. Fanny comes to live with them, as we say. Mrs. Norris, terrible. Lady Bertram, not terrible, not very engaged, shall we say.
Yeah.
Always just kind of lying on the couch, petting a pug. Sir Thomas Bertram, rather a stern taskmaster type, but he does love his children. He just doesn't really understand them and doesn't understand how to relate to them.
Yeah.
As the summary said, Edmund and Fanny form this really special relationship as first cousin to first cousin, as first cousins do.
And Edmund ends up replacing someone in Fanny's life.
Right. So Fanny, as mentioned, has like 9 brothers and sisters, but her very favorite sibling is her brother William, who is at sea. And so occasionally we see William because he gets to come and visit when his ship is put into shore, and this becomes a plot point later. So that's them. They all grow up together. Mrs. Norris, like I said, terrible. Mr. Norris eventually dies, and Mrs. Norris moves into a different house, and into the parsonage comes this new parson, Dr. Grant. And let me explain now what a living is, because this is where it becomes important. So
Right.
There's lots of livings in Jane Austen.
This is one of the only times where it really matters.
There's a lot of living plot in this, so I took it upon myself to just like make sure I understood. Okay, so in England at this time, there were something like 11,000 parishes that someone had the power of appointing a clergy person to. And the parish consisted of usually a house and some land. So you could make your living as a parson, both by being the parson of this parish, living in this house for free, essentially, and also like getting the income of the land, whether that was like renting it out to tenants or crops or whatever it might be. Some of these were controlled by the crown and some were controlled by the church, but the majority of them were controlled by like wealthy families who had these livings in their gift. They were family livings, and the important thing about a living, as implied by its name, is that if you gave this living to someone, to a parson, it was theirs for life. What would often happen is that your first son, of course, inherited your fortune, and the second son never gets anything because you don't want to split up the property. You want the property to remain a single property, so you're not going to split it all up between all of your sons. Everything goes to your first son, and then your second son has to choose some profession. So you have second sons in the military, the law, or the church. Like those were the three things that a second son of a rich family could reasonably do. And so Edmund chooses to go into the church. But what happens is when Mr. Norris dies, who is a family member who had held this living, the living now becomes vacant. And the idea would be, of course, that Edmund, as the second son, would come into this living after he becomes ordained and get all of the income that this living would bestow upon him. However, because of Tom's profligacy and his debts and his gambling and his drinking, he has spent all the money that his father has, and his father needs a way. His father is cash poor and needs a way of raising some money quickly. So what his father essentially has done is sold a life right to this living to someone else. And that person, it turns out, is Dr. Grant. And so basically he said, I still own this living. I'm not selling it to you, but I'm selling you the right of being the parson in this living rather than just giving it to someone in my family for your lifetime. And that's why he admonishes Tom that because of Tom's sort of, spendthrift ways, he's deprived Edmund for, as he says, 10, 20, 30 years, perhaps for life, of the income that should have been his. The nice thing is this family is so rich that they actually have two livings. So Edmund can take the other living. It's just not as good a living. He could have had both livings, but he can't. He's not going to get the Mansfield living until Dr. Grant leaves or dies, which at the end of the book he does leave and Edmund gets the Mansfield living. So everything works out fine. Everybody got that? I'm sure this is probably not worth the amount of time I just put into it.
I feel like, just as a quick little aside, what this ended up doing is it ended up giving more context to some of Jane Austen's other stories for us.
Yeah.
Pride and Prejudice, for example.
Right.
With
Mr. Wickham was supposed to have a living.
I was thinking Mr. Collins.
Mr. Collins does have a living.
Yeah.
And Mr. Wickham, if you recall, was supposed to go into the priesthood and have a living.
Right.
But he essentially sold his right in his living to Mr. Darcy. He took the cash, essentially.
I just remember the question came up for us is like, why would the Lady Catherine de Bourgh want Mr. Collins to have the living?
Answer unclear.
I like this guy enough that he should have this until he dies.
Until he dies. All right. So Tom, like I said, is profligate, and Sir Thomas needs to go and see how some of his interests in Antigua are doing because, again, cash poor.
Let's talk about this.
Okay.
What do his interests involve?
Slaves.
Okay, cool. Let's just talk about it.
Colonialism in this.
Yeah, this is one of the only ones where that's in there.
Yeah.
This seems to be one of those things that a lot of people disagree about in regards to this book.
Sure.
So can I give the quick version of it?
Yes.
Here's some things we can't do.
Yeah.
We cannot say, this is what Jane Austen felt in her heart when she wrote this book, and this is what her intention was.
Correct.
We do not know that.
Yes.
We do have some indications and some facts, and we have a lot of people's different interpretations.
Yes.
There's like one camp that looks at this book as proof that Jane Austen didn't care about slavery.
Yes.
And wasn't an abolitionist because basically it's mentioned, but nothing really comes of it.
It kind of goes unexplored.
Yes, it's very, very much unexplored. And then there's another camp that's like, no, she absolutely was an abolitionist. There is additional proof that she was against slavery.
Yeah.
And there's just one moment in the book where I don't even think it happens in the reader's view. I think it's something that like Fanny describes later.
Okay.
She is talking to Sir Thomas, brings up slavery, and he doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
And she's like, it was notable to me that he didn't say anything. And then I changed the subject.
Yes.
And that's basically all the book does.
Yeah.
It's messy.
Yeah.
And it is interesting to me that it's one of those times where it's rough. If you're going to adapt this, you really need to make a decision about whether you're going to tackle it or not.
Yeah.
And I feel like the thing we came out the other side is like, I guess not tackling it at all.
Not great.
That's not great. Tackling it, but dropping the ball.
Also not great.
Also not great, but better than not tackling it.
Sure.
Obviously, like what you want is you want someone to get it right.
Yeah.
I don't know that that ever really happens, but slavery in the book, I just want to make sure that we are on record as having talked about it.
Yes.
Because, yeah, it's part of it and it's rough.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it later. So Sir Thomas goes off to Antigua and takes Tom with him because he thinks this will sort of be the making of Tom and make him a responsible person. In his absence, Maria becomes engaged to Mr. Rushworth, which on paper is an excellent match for her because he is a large landowner, a very wealthy young man, and very prominent in society. He's also an idiot, which becomes a problem later.
Seems to be a problem at the beginning.
It's a problem from the start. And the other interesting thing that happens is that, so Dr. Grant, who we already talked about being the parish priest, his wife, Mrs. Grant, has these two younger half-siblings, and they come to live with her, and they are very fashionable young people, Henry Crawford and Mary Crawford, and they become very intimate very quickly with the young people at Mansfield Park. Another character who is not very important is introduced. Well, I guess he becomes kind of important later. Is Mr. Yates. He's a friend of Tom. Oh, and Tom comes back from Antigua before his father gets back. So he's like not super clear as to why. So all these young people are kind of gathered together, and it's the winter, and they don't have much to do, and they decide to put on a play. And the play is like 18 chapters of this goddamn book. Suffice it to say, there's a lot of drama, as Jane Austen must have participated. This is like waiting for Guffman level, like realism and detail about what it's like to put on community theater.
My meager research seemed to show that she did some acting herself.
Yes. Yeah. That does not surprise me even a little, because there's like bickering about who's going to take what part. Everyone's more concerned about like the sets and the costume than actually rehearsing the play. There's bickering about like what play they're going to do. There's not enough men to do all the parts. Like it is like really spot on perfect for anyone that's ever done any kind of theater. So I really actually like this part a lot. But it goes on for a while.
Yeah. It's too long.
It's too long.
It's
like
fun,
anyone
but
would
it's
agree.
too long.
So anyway, they end up doing this play called Lover's Vows, which is a real play, and it's very controversial because it is not super proper. Like it's a little bit risque. Edmund refuses to act for a while until it becomes clear that Tom is going to like pull in random people from the neighborhood, and he's like, ugh, I guess we better just like keep this in our family.
Yeah,
I'll take this part. Sure.
There's
fine.
two wet blankets.
Yeah.
Like there are two people who are not on board with this at all, and it's Edmund and Fanny.
Right. So Edmund reluctantly gets dragged into it, and Fanny is like, I will help you. Like, I will sew your costumes and like run lines with you and like whatever it is, but like I'm not going to act because I am sure my uncle would not approve of me acting in this play, which indeed he does not, because he shows up at the last possible. Oh, it's all Mr. Yates's fault, by the way. All of this is all Mr. Yates's fault. So anyway, Sir Thomas shows up at the last possible second, shuts down the play. Everyone's kind of mad, and they never get to put on this play. But also in the process of this rehearsal, despite the fact that Maria is engaged to Mr. Rushworth, who is in the play and very excited to be in the play and have 240 speeches, Maria is having like an intense flirtation with Henry Crawford, and Julia is also like kind of very into Henry Crawford. So there's this whole like love triangle thing happening.
I love the way they describe Henry Crawford as like Jane Austen goes out of her way to say like he's not handsome.
Yeah.
But he is very attractive.
Very charming.
Yeah.
Very charming. So Sir Thomas comes back. He is like, this guy, Mr. Rushworth, he's an idiot, right? And he goes to his daughter and is like, if you want to get out of this, despite any dishonor this may throw upon our family, like, I am happy to get you out of it because he is really stupid. And I am really not sure you're going to be happy. Like, I know that he's got a big house, but like, are you sure? And Maria, who has now been sort of like thrown over by Henry Crawford, who I think she thought was gonna like kind of scoop her up and take her away from all this, is like, no, in fact, I would like to be married immediately because I want to have a big house and be a great lady and do all this stuff. So he's like, okay. So they're married. Like by halfway through the book, Maria is married, she is off on her honeymoon, and Julia goes with them, and we literally never see them again. We hear tell of them, and the things that they get up to by the end of the book are very important, but we actually do not see them again for the rest of the book. So now it's just Fanny at the house with her Tom goes back to London to go do his thing.
Yeah.
Edmund's at the house, but he's going to go like take orders with his friend. So he's off like visiting his friend. And Fanny's just like lonely at the house, having to like wait on her aunts all the time. And
one of whom is not the worst,
one of whom,
but not great, and the other is the worst.
yeah. And lo and behold, Henry Crawford tells his sister, this kid Fanny needs to be shaken up a bit. I'm going to make her fall in love with me. And Mary's like, I mean, that's pretty funny, but like, she's great, just so you know. Like, could you maybe try not to hurt her feelings too much? And he's like, eh. And she's like, all right, but like, seriously, she's like, I actually really like her. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe just like, try not to be too much of a jerk.
And also, I'm a little distracted because I'm also trying to get Edmund.
Oh, right. Totally forgot to mention. Mary wants Edmund and also wants Edmund to give up this idea of being a clergyman because she hates clergymen and does not want Edmund to be poor. There seems to be a lot of like insuperable barriers against this match, since she doesn't like him or want him to be poor, but she also wants to marry him. I don't know. I think she's just banking on the fact, and this becomes explicit later on, she just like is banking on the fact that maybe Tom will die.
Yeah.
And then Edmund will inherit the estate.
She's a very good person.
Yes. Henry Crawford does not succeed in making Fanny fall in love with him. However, he succeeds, much against his will, in falling in love with Fanny, like for real, as much as he can love anybody. I don't get the sense that like he's making that up. Like, I think he does fancy himself in love with her.
No, I think he thinks he's in love
That's
with her.
what I mean.
Yeah. I don't think he actually is in love with her.
Yes.
I think he wants her.
He wants to marry. He asked her to marry him, like for real. Like,
yes.
Like when he went into this sort of flirtation, he did not expect it would end in him actually making her an offer of marriage. She refuses him in the strongest possible terms because she has seen the way that he's flirted with everybody, like including her cousins, and she just thinks he's not a good person.
I mean, if she refused in the strongest possible terms, he wouldn't keep asking and it wouldn't cause so much trouble.
Right.
Because clearly the way she should have refused was by doing it very publicly in front of everyone and then murdered him.
Right.
Because that
right.
would have
avoided... was apparently the only way she could possibly have gotten her point across.
That's the only thing that would have worked.
Yes. And her uncle is now kind of mad at her because like this guy, you know, on paper again is a good guy and he's got a good fortune and he's been very attentive. She's very upset, and her uncle's like, all right, it's okay. Like, obviously, if you hate him that much, I guess, you know, we'll just hope that he can win you over.
Yeah. Also, I'm very disappointed.
Also, I'm very disappointed in you. She's very upset to have disappointed her uncle in this way. And he, not explicitly as punishment, but sort of sends her back to visit her family for a time, who she has not seen in 10 years.
I thought one of their thoughts of sending her home was to let it marinate for a bit.
Well, yes, that is his thought, but he doesn't like look her in the eye and say, I am punishing you by sending you back to your family. And in at least one movie version that we watched, he was like, this is your punishment.
Yeah.
So he sends her back to Portsmouth. She doesn't like it there. First of all, her father's terrible. She discovers her father's kind of a drunken brute. Her mother is much put upon. She has a sister, Susan, who she's never really known, who she discovers is great. Her brother, William, is there for like a day, and then he has to go back out to sea.
Not even. They like arrive, and he has to put to sea immediately.
Yeah, like, well, there's this funny scene where they arrive, and everyone's like, the boat's here, the boat's here. Did you know the boat's here? Hey, the boat's here. And people keep running in and going, hey, William, the boat's here. You gotta go. So he goes. And she's got all these like little brothers and sisters that are kind of awful and just like running around and screaming all the time. And at one point when they're on their way, William is like, I don't know what it is, but like our house, it seems kind of chaotic. I don't know what that's about. Maybe you can fix it. And Fanny's like, oh, yes, that's definitely a great idea. I'm just going to come in and like tell my mother what to do. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So Fanny makes herself kind of indispensable because like back at Mansfield Park, like everything, there's servants and everything just kind of runs. And she like tries to be helpful to her Aunt Bertram because she really does love her a lot. But like she always kind of feels like she's in the way and like she's not as important as the actual sons and daughters of the house. But like back at her own house, she's like the most important. Like everyone's really impressed by her and she's quite a lady and like all this stuff. So she's been there for a while and Henry comes and visits her and everyone's very impressed by him and he offers to marry her again and she says no again and sends him away. Then Fanny gets some terrible news, which is that Tom is back at Mansfield and is very, very sick. He has the consumption and the brain fever all in one. And they fear for his life. He's got all of the Jane Austen diseases. And as all this is happening in the sort of confusion of all of these events, it turns out not only is Tom at death's door, but Mariah and Mr. Crawford have run off together, and it is in the newspaper. It is public knowledge. This thing has happened. This terrible, terrible, scandalous thing. So Edmund comes and gets her to come home to Mansfield Park and sort of condole with the family. Mrs. Norris is kind of disgraced in Sir Thomas's eyes because she was the one that set up this match in the first place, and she's like, well, my dearest Mariah, like, of course we can have her back. And Sir Thomas is like, fuck that. So she gets bundled off to go and pick up Mariah and like go live with her for the rest of her days. Turns out that Julia has also run off to be married to Mr. Yates, and everyone's kind of like, well, I guess hopefully she'll be happy. Like, no one really cares.
It's like, I mean, I think Jane Austen goes out of her way to say, like, in any other circumstance, this would be very embarrassing.
Yes.
But because of Mariah,
no one knows.
This wasn't so bad.
Yes. Oh, and so Edmund has been in love with Mary Crawford this whole time, but Mary really puts her foot in it by like explicitly saying to everyone. Well, it's to
No,
Fanny.
She says it to Edmund.
She says it to Fanny, and she says it in the letter to Fanny.
Yeah.
And she says it to Edmund. Like, wouldn't it be great if your brother died? So that
Well, no, she says, I'm not saying it would be great if your brother died.
But if he died.
What I'm saying is if he died, other things would be great.
And Edmund's like, that's a terrible thing to say. Oh, and she's also like, because it's her brother that's run off with Mariah, she's like, I mean, like, yeah, she's disgraced. Like, certainly there are some people that, like, she's never going to be able to come into their society again. But, like, in these modern times, if we invite her back into our home, it would probably be okay. And everyone's like, no, she cannot come back. Like,
she just immediately goes into damage control mode.
Yeah.
But it's very clear that the damage she's trying to control is the damage to her prospects and her brother's prospects.
Yes, because she wants them to marry.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, that would be a terrible idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would we want this girl chained to this guy that, like, disgraced her? Anyway, they don't stay together. They do break up eventually, and Mariah goes off somewhere. And, oh, by the way, Fanny and Edmund get married. Like, Fanny's been in love with Edmund this whole time.
Yeah, because Edmund has his big realization. I was going to say, have you ever had that experience of, like, being infatuated with someone? I'm talking about like high school. As far as I'm concerned, this is the most high school Jane Austen book I've ever read.
Sure.
Did you ever have that experience of being like just totally infatuated with someone and then they did a thing that made you realize, oh, they're a person?
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
That definitely happened to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so clear. Like I really identified with Edmund in that moment.
Yeah.
Where he's like, oh, I see. You're actually a terrible person.
Yeah.
How could I? Better go marry my cousin.
Better go marry my cousin. So conveniently, Dr. Grant gets a better post. He leaves for London. Edmund gets the living after all, and he and Fanny live happily ever after at the end.
With Tom, who did not die.
Tom, who did not die. That's it. That's the book.
I mean, you've left out a big aspect of it.
Oh.
And that's Fanny's character.
Sure.
Here we are half an hour into the show. Let's give some quick reactions. You'd read this book before.
Yeah.
Obviously. What do you think of Mansfield Park?
Well, my recollection is basically Fanny sucks. That was what I remember, and I believe I even said to you going into it, Fanny sucks.
Well, I didn't know who the main character was, so I read the first chapter and was like, hey, who's the main character of this? And you're like, Fanny Price is the main character.
Gotcha.
I was like, okay. And you said, and she sucks.
Yes. That was my greatest recollection.
And what was your recollection of just liking the book at all?
That was fine.
So then we both reread it.
Yes.
I came out of it thinking that the book was okay.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't love this book.
Yeah.
I thought it was just all right. I love Fanny Price so goddamn much.
Yeah, no, she's great. She's great.
I love her. She is, to date, my favorite Jane Austen heroine. I look at Lizzie Bennet and, Emma. They're all very forthright, very confident people. Like, that's the whole thing. That's the thing that attracts Darcy to Lizzie the entire time, is that she's so confident.
Mm-hmm.
And she's so modern. And Fanny is so intentionally awkward and quiet. And she has anxiety on every single page.
Yeah.
And she just feels like real people that I know.
Yeah.
And I love her.
Yes.
I love her.
Yeah. I don't disagree. I think she's great. She's very relatable. She's I mean, you can't relate to Lizzie Bennet. Lizzie Bennet's perfect.
Yeah.
But you can relate to Fanny just being like, do they like me?
Mhm.
This is weird.
Fanny, you must act with us. I couldn't possibly.
I don't want to.
Like, and I love that she, like, as you say, like, a big part of it is, like, I don't think my uncle would want me to, but that's only part of it.
Yeah.
The other part of it is she's like, I couldn't possibly.
Yeah.
The observation I had is that there's that great moment in the 95 Pride and Prejudice when Lizzie is visiting Pemberley for the first time,
Mhm.
and she has that great moment where she goes, we must leave this place at once. And it's so beautiful and it's so awkward, and I think anyone can identify with it. My observation was like they basically take that moment and expand it into someone's characterization the entire story.
Yeah.
That's Fanny the whole time.
Yeah.
I loved it. And that became the important thing to me. Where like as we were going into the adaptations, I was going like, okay, change whatever you want about the story. I don't really care. The play, that certainly takes a really long time.
Yep.
I don't need to see that much of it. But I have a character that is important to me to see carried through
Leave
on
me my
the screen.
Fanny Price.
I want my Fanny. I never knew I cared about my Fanny, but now I love my Fanny.
Leave your Fanny alone.
Yeah, just like do whatever you can do, but don't touch my Fanny.
Yep.
Does that match up with how you felt reading it this time?
Yes, I would say so. I just remember Fanny being like insufferable, and I think that as you get older, you sort of have more sympathy for someone who's a little insufferable. I don't know. I guess maybe I was just too close to it because she reminds me of so many people, like as you say, that
Mhm.
like I know, like, or that I knew, like in college. Like,
Yeah.
she just reminds me of a lot of people I knew in college.
Yes.
Just-
Same.
so I don't know. Maybe I was too close to it at the time. Like oddly enough, I feel like now. I don't know. I feel like everyone I know is just too tired to be anxious about the things that Fanny's anxious about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
Well, Fanny, like her anxiety comes out because of exposure to people.
Yeah.
Like if Fanny was just by herself all the time, it wouldn't really come out that much.
Right.
And all of us have been stuck inside our own homes for 3 years
Sure.
now, you know. There's one more aspect of the book that I just want to talk about to make sure we kind of at least have discussed it, because I feel like something that's come up every time we've looked at Jane Austen is this idea of when you're adapting it, how are you handling the fact that the world works differently in the books of Jane Austen than it does now?
Yep.
Like it's by definition not modern. Even though in one of the versions someone does say, it's 1806 for God's
I
sake.
hated that.
I know you do. But like it's not modern. And so we've watched dozens of Jane Austen adaptations now, and it seems like you can do a combination of things. Like you can embrace the fact that things work differently and try to make your story work within the confines of how society worked at that time. Or you can fight against it the entire time, either by coming up with something completely new and just ignoring all of it and just saying like, no, everyone's just going to act like people do now, which I don't think is inherently invalid because all of these have to be judged on whether they're individually successful or not. But then there's this kind of middle ground that we've seen happen a number of times where they seemingly are embracing the fact that it is a different time, but then ignoring the social expectations when it became convenient to do so for the story.
Sure. Yeah. Thus just sort of making their own universe, like not being internally consistent.
Yeah. And I feel like if you're going to adapt Jane Austen, personally, I don't know why someone would be excited about adapting Jane Austen if one of the things you wanted to adapt wasn't the fact that society worked differently at the time.
Right.
Like, if you don't want to embrace it, there's tons of other stories to adapt. I don't know if Jane Austen is the thing to adapt. Or go the Clueless route.
Right.
Like, just totally update it because the stories are good and the relationships between the characters are good and the characters are defined in a good way. So if you want to update it, just update it. That's fine.
Yeah. Or occasionally you get sort of the Autumn de Wilde's Emma, which is like
yes.
somehow manages to find that really thin line where you sort of can do both.
Yeah.
But like you have to be very good to find that balance.
Yeah.
I think we've seen very few that were able to do that.
Yeah, like I feel like, you know, if we want to give examples of some of these things, like 95 Pride and Prejudice is the one that says we're in this world. We are in this world. It is the world of the time, obviously to a plausible level.
Yeah.
And we're going to make our story work within that. So you're going to have someone like Andrew Davies writing in the script that Darcy has a hard on when he's I know, I understand that. But that's a real thing that happened. So that he wrote that.
I know.
But like he put it in the subtext.
I understand.
Like, they were like, you have to act in a way that is appropriate for the time, but just so you know, Colin, this is what's happening to you behind the scenes. We're going to acknowledge that as filmmakers. And then you have, as you said, the Autumn to Wild Emma, which also kind of operates within all the same societal constraints, but manages to make it feel very modern.
Yes.
And the way people act feels very modern, even though the things they're doing are very old-fashioned. And then you have ones that, I'm not bringing this up to say a lot of negative things about it, but there's the 2005 Pride and Prejudice,
Sure.
which I think us personally, we didn't respond to that much because it seems to just kind of make up its own thing.
Right.
And say like, sometimes we're going to act like we're doing something that exists in that time, but then we're just going to ignore it a lot of the times and just make it feel modern and fight against what society was.
I see what you're saying. Should we talk about these 3 movie adaptations?
Yes.
Well, 1 miniseries and 2 movies.
Let's start in 1983. So as you say, there was a BBC miniseries. 1983 ran for 6 episodes. Directed by David Giles, written by Kenneth Taylor. It starred Sylvester Latouzal as Fanny Price. This is a weird situation where I'm kind of spoiling how we feel about the next 2.
Okay.
Because there's also the 1999 movie with Frances O'Connor and the 2007 TV movie with Billie Piper.
Correct.
If one or both of those ended up really blowing us away, I feel like our conversation about the 1983 version would be pretty short.
Yep.
Because it's okay.
Yeah.
It's fine. I don't think it's amazing. It didn't blow my socks off. But we didn't really love either of those 2 movies.
Okay.
So this was the best one that we watched?
I mean, it certainly was, if you're sort of doing Jane Austen, as you say, on a scale of like, we're really embracing the time all the way through to, I don't know, Emma approved.
Yeah.
This was definitely on the page brought to life, page to screen type of adaptation. A 1980s BBC miniseries. And it's weird that this didn't get readapted in the 90s, because I feel like all these Jane Austens have like a BBC one from the 70s or 80s and then another BBC one from the 90s. It didn't have that middle one. And I don't know if it's because there just was a cinematic movie at that time that they were trying not to compete with. Anyway, it's weird to me there wasn't one like 10 years later.
This kind of goes with what I was saying before about how like, some of the other ones that have a million adaptations, it's weird for me to break out of that mindset of like, yeah, if it's not Pride and Prejudice or Emma, there's not that many of them.
Well, yeah. But all this to say, it had that weird sort of 1980s production values where they were just doing this for no money. Like, they've got a costume closet, obviously, somewhere in the BBC that they're rating.
I'm going to go ahead and say doing it for some money.
Yeah, some money.
Because there's one coming later that I think they genuinely did for no money.
0 money, yeah. And the other thing, too, is I think sometimes it's a little bit unfair to compare a 6 or 8 or 10 episode miniseries to a 90-minute movie, because they had so much space to explore these characters. Like, they did the whole book. Like, they did everything from the book, because the book is not immensely long. Like, you can do the book in 6 hour long episodes.
Yeah. And everything kind of fits in nicely. Like, I remember when we were watching, you were like, the play is going to be 1 episode.
Yeah.
And it was exactly like that. The plot of that episode was, let's put on a play. And it ended with Sir Thomas is home.
Yeah. I guess, notably, Sylvester Latouzal's performance in this is one of the weirdest, not to say good or bad, I'm not making a judgment call.
Yep.
It is one of the weirdest performances I've ever seen committed to screen.
For like a lead character.
For a lead character in a Jane Austen adaptation.
Yeah. Like, this one does have the weirdest performance I've ever seen in a Jane Austen adaptation.
Yeah.
But not from a lead.
Not from a lead. So we've got a couple of very strange performances. We've got, I just want to talk about Sylvester Latouzal. I'm just going to just jump right into it. She is so awkward in this. She has that thing. She just reminded me of so many people I went to college with, because she doesn't know what to do with her hands. And her hair is always a little messy.
Can you remind everyone where you went to college, by the way? Just so that just in case anyone is thinking, what kind of college did you go to?
I went to a small liberal arts college on the East Coast, 20 minutes north of New York City, called Sarah Lawrence College. If you are familiar with it, you know what I'm talking about.
You might even be going there now yourself.
You might. It is entirely possible.
I feel like, we could make a Venn diagram of the type of people who would listen to this show. I feel like Sarah Lawrence students.
Disproportionately represented, I'm sure, as listeners of this podcast.
I'm not saying it's a circle, but yeah.
You went to Emerson, which is like not that much better.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. She is just enormously awkward. It's very weird because it looks like she's wearing like a lot of black eyeliner.
Mhm.
Like you pointed out at one point, like she looks like Mary Pickford
Yeah.
or like one of these like silent movie stars because she's very pale. She's got these big eyes. She's got like a lot of eyeliner, which is kind of weird for Jane Austen. She just looks physically different than everybody else, you know, in the world of Jane Austen. But we got to and she's there's no word I can describe. She's always she's kind of like, she'll stand up quickly and kind of fall over something, and like her voice is really high pitched, and she just, I mean, awkward is the only word for it.
Mhm.
And we were saying for the first 5 out of 6 episodes, I can't tell if she is playing awkward really, really well, like so well that it's uncomfortable, or if she, the actress, is awkward. And then we got to the episode where she goes home to her family in Portsmouth, and I looked at you and I was like, I think Sylvestre Latouzle is playing the long game because she's suddenly not awkward. Like she goes home to her family, a place where she is needed and wanted and useful and not, if not happy, at least like
She's keeping busy.
And like suddenly she's not awkward. And even when Henry Crawford comes to see her, like she is suddenly like a different person. I mean, I won't speak for you.
No. I'm right on board.
I went from thinking she was not a good actor and was very awkward to thinking she's an amazing actor and is playing Fanny brilliantly. So I don't know. I really came around. That's where I landed. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
I'm not going to say that I landed on her as positively as you did. I think she was definitely better than I thought. I had the same kind of experience in that last episode. I don't know that she was amazing, but it is, I mean, I think we can say confidently this is a good performance.
Yes.
Can I talk about the weirdest performance, though?
Yes, please do.
Because it's not Sylvestre Latouzle. It is Angela Pleasance as Lady Bertram.
Yeah.
Angela Pleasance, who was in Eponine in one of the Les Mis we watched. She's related to Donald Pleasance. I'm just going to say it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the fuck she was doing in this.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I don't know why she was cast in it. I genuinely don't know what she was actually doing in this part. I don't know if this was a result of, this is the story it reminds me of all the time.
Yeah.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory,
Mm-hmm.
which we watched for the show, the Johnny Depp one.
Yes, we did.
Apparently, as they were in pre-production, there was an understanding that Johnny Depp was going to sound a certain way when he showed up on set to play Willy Wonka.
Yeah.
And famously, he like showed up basically day one and was like, I came up with a different voice to do, and it's how I will be acting the character.
Yeah.
And apparently that's what they went with, which is one of the reasons why his performance is so weird.
Yes.
Because he just invented it and no one told him no. Maybe that's what happened here. Maybe, no, I'm saying I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm saying
Who can say?
It could be Angela Pleasance showed up and said, this is what I plan on doing. Or she was working it and rehearsing, and the director or one of the producers said, this is what we want you to do.
Yeah.
Because her performance is really consistent.
Yes.
So it feels very on purpose. And I just don't know if it was her doing it or if she was being directed to do it this way. But she is not playing relaxed and a little over it, out of touch. She's playing head injury.
Yeah.
She's out of her mind.
It's very strange.
She's absolutely out. Her performance is
don't
like
don't try to
No.
don't try to imitate it.
What I'm gonna say is her performance is like someone doing an impression of Bjork. That's the best way I can describe it. It is an insane performance that is so weird, and there's just like a lilt in her voice that is very unsettling.
Yeah.
And off-putting and bizarre.
She sounds anesthetized.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And maybe they were going for that.
Yeah, who can say?
Maybe this was totally on purpose.
It's very weird though.
Someone was doing it on purpose, but it is an insane performance.
Yes.
Like worth it. I would say
Worth a watch.
worth a watch for her alone, because it's like nothing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it's so weird that I can't even say that it's bad. I just don't know what she was doing.
It's certainly internally consistent.
Yeah.
Like she never drops it. I will say the thing that it does do is kind of play up the contrast between her and the other characters who are constantly taking charge, because obviously this woman can't take charge or do anything.
Yeah.
And I truly thought that Anna Massey as Mrs. Norris is like the platonic ideal of Mrs. Norris. Like, it's exactly how I pictured her.
I did hate her, yes.
Yes, she was simply awful to everyone, but like constantly running around, just like chattering, being totally useless, being really full of herself, and just like honestly, like exactly as I would have pictured reading the book.
I feel like as they were getting ready to do it, she knew all her lines, her acting was great, and she went to talk to, David Giles, let's say the director, and said, like, something isn't working. And he says, you know what? And I agree with you. Something is not quite right. We could fix something. And one of them said, oh, I have an amazing idea. And I just imagine her going like, what if I did it all like this? And she just bent over at the waist and gave herself kind of a hunch.
Yeah, I don't know why she did that. It was very strange.
But it's just like Angela Pleasance's performance. It's very internally consistent.
Yeah.
She's doing it the entire time.
That's right.
But it's like she's bent over a little too much for it to feel natural. It just feels very theatrical.
Really
like, it's the kind of thing I could see someone doing in a play, in like an abstract play. But in a show like this, I'm not sure it works. But it does give her a certain physicality that tells you a lot about the character.
Yeah, I mean, some of the creative choices just aesthetically, not to mention like people's performances or like weird bodily posture, like every hat in this movie is insane.
Yeah.
I don't know where these hats came from. The costumes are fine. The dresses are fine. The hair.
The hair. Usually you're the one talking about the hair. I feel like we both have things to say about the hair. Do you want to talk about the Crawfords and I'll talk about Yates?
Yeah, I don't know what was going on with the Crawfords. I think they definitely wanted to make all three Crawfords very obviously brother and sister.
Mm-hmm.
So they gave them all, and they were like, so we need 3 wigs the same, and they have to be unisex.
I think I don't think that was a wig.
You think that's his hair?
That looked like his hair because it looked like a very traditional kind of like, I am a gentleman with curly hair.
Dark curly hair, black curly hair.
Yeah.
And so they were like, okay, so you've got this actor. He looks pretty good. He's got very curly black hair. So we're going to give both of the sisters identical wigs to have the same hair. So they all 3 had this like sort of short, and it is
like a short black perm.
Sure, a short black perm, and it is accurate that in Jane Austen's time that was a hairstyle. Like women did have short hair sometimes, especially if their hair was curly like that. So that's not like historically inaccurate that you would have a haircut that short, but it was certainly weird on the actor because it was very obviously a wig that was not a very good wig.
No.
And it tended to spoil her beauty somewhat.
This was Jackie Smith Wood as Mary Crawford and Robert Burbage as Henry Crawford that we've been talking about. 2 fine performances.
Fine.
I thought they were fine.
Perfectly fine.
As in
fine. They were fine.
They were fine.
But there was another hair situation that really eclipsed the Crawford's hair that I think you desperately want to talk about.
I want to talk about Mr. Yates. I cannot describe his hair. I
have a description.
What is your description of his hair? I wanted to talk about it, but please, if you have a description, please.
Okay. In the film Waiting for Guffman,
okay,
the way that Christopher Guest styled himself as Corky St. Clair was he took a toupee and just placed it on top of his own hair. So he had...
I thought he was also wearing it backwards.
Yes, a backwards toupee. So he had his own like sort of gray hair with sort of a sandy strawberry blonde backwards toupee just placed on top of his own hair. That's what this looks like.
This was worse than that.
It was worse than that.
Because it was like long, it looked like a bowl cut.
Yeah.
So it was like long hair, all completely straight, coming down.
Coming down to his eyes.
Like coming down to his eyes. So everything that I'm saying so far is a style. It's not like weird. Imagine someone with perfectly straight hair, a gentleman with hair coming down, over their eyes. It is straight.
Mullety in the back.
A little bit mullety in the back, but also long on the sides and long on the front.
Very straight, I think is the point that you're making.
Yeah. But on the top of their head, in like a 6-inch circle, was like a million curls.
It's sort of a bump it situation.
Yes, I think that's accurate.
A bit of a bump it.
It is the weirdest hairstyle ever. It is clearly a wig.
Yeah, no,
it's obviously a wig. But it just like Angela Pleasance's performance and Anna Massey's body posture, it feels too specific to be unintentional.
Yeah.
So I guess it has to be accurate. It must have been accurate, right?
I think, yeah, I think that was a hairstyle. Like if you look at like Lord Byron, like I
Yeah.
think that's what they were trying to do. He did have this sort of hair with the straight like sideburns and sort of a bump it on the top. Like I think they were trying to do Byron because he was supposed to be artistic. You know, he's the one that wants to do the play and everything. Like, yeah.
I feel like it's a great illustration of how when you're doing things that are historical, like you can't just say we're going to be 100% accurate because sometimes being accurate is distracting.
Yeah.
And sometimes being accurate actually bolsters your story and actually makes your adaptation better. This is one of those ones where I would argue, just me, in my humble opinion, I would argue that it's very distracting.
It was somewhat distracting. And you hear about that. There are certain things that really happened that you can't put in movies because no one would believe that that's how it really happened.
Sure.
There's such coincidences that was so amazing that it just seems unbelievable. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson died on the same day, and it was the 4th of July. That's crazy. Like, so that, and then you put that in a movie and everyone's like, oh my God, that's so over the top. But it happened. It really happened. John Adams' last words were Thomas Jefferson still survives. When he didn't, he had died. But you can't put that in a movie because it actually, do you hear what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like it's distracting, as you say.
You look like you have something you want to say.
I actually have 2 things I want to say.
Does this have anything to do with Mansfield Park?
No.
Okay.
First of all, for the holiday season this year, Jeremy asked me what I would like for a gift. And I said I did not need any material possessions. And I thought about it for a little while. And I said, you know what I want? I want a cameo. And if you don't know what a cameo is, basically, it's like this cool thing that you can get a celebrity, usually a minor celebrity, to record a little personalized video message for you. It's fun. He got me 2 cameos, but the one I want to talk about touched me deeply. He got...
I asked William Daniels
yes.
to record a quick video message
yes.
for my wife.
Yes. And he said, hello, Ari, this is Bill Daniels from 1776. And it was very sweet. And then he said something about how John Adams said commitment. And it was amazing. He's 95 years old. And I just felt truly blessed to have received this gift. So A, amazing. B, the radio station we listen to in our car.
Are you going to poop on Emerson again?
Is the Emerson College radio
station. You had to get a dig in before, and now you've got to do it again.
We really enjoy the Emerson College radio station.
88.9 WERS in Boston.
Yep.
It's a great radio station.
We love it. No, we love it. We listen to it all the time. And they have, I believe, one of the country's only musical theater music programs, Saturday and Sunday mornings, and it's hosted by students who are radio.
They're learning to do
radio.
Yeah.
And clearly the students who do the musical theater program are like big musical theater nerds. Like they love musical theater. Like it's actually very fun and very sweet. But we're driving down the road and
I've never seen you more angry.
They played the song Sit Down, John from 1776. And I was really excited because I love 1776, one of my favorite musicals of all time.
One of the reasons why William Daniels was like, "Hi, Ari, it's Bill Daniels from 1776." Not
Mr. Feeney.
Not I'm Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets World.
Not Knight Rider.
You never watched Knight Rider.
I've never seen Knight Rider in my
life.
life.
Knight Rider was great.
I've actually never seen Boy Meets World.
But Boy Meets World was also something from our childhood.
Yes.
But I did express to him that 1776 is the thing that you love him from.
Yes. So anyway, I was really excited because they're playing a song from 1776, and then the song ended, and
this kid who is guilty of nothing.
This goddamn child comes on the radio and says, "That was Sit Down, John from 1776." You know, that reminds me kind of in Hamilton when they say "Sit down, John." And I looked at you. I mean, you have to describe what my reaction was.
Well, I started laughing because I knew what your reaction was going to be. And I looked at you and you were so mad. And you were like, "It is a direct reference." And then you asked me to drive us down to the station so that you could yell at them in person.
I did not. I was mad.
You were so mad at this kid doing their best.
Because they were acting as if it were a coincidence, when in fact there are many, many, many quotes and samples in Hamilton from other things, and one of them is "Sit Down, John" from 1776. Anyway, you can cut all this.
I don't want to.
Okay. Do you have anything else you want to say about the 1983 Mansfield Park I have a bunch of like random notes, but it's basically like, what's that hat? What the fuck? Why is William 40? Like just sort of random reactions. And I don't think anything else, like any major seam that I want to get into.
I got a couple of things.
Go for it.
I do want to talk about just a super quick thing about Angela Pleasance, and this is related to one of her co-stars. Her acting is ridiculous, but her pug manipulation is second to none. Do you remember the scene? Because she's got, in every single version, Lady Bertram has a pug.
Yes.
And in this one, she's got the pug, and she's waving the pug's little paw to like wave goodbye to somebody. And it's really cute. By the way, the pug's name is Snuff. And Snuff gets a credit in every single episode.
In every episode.
It was absolutely adorable. I did love that. Going back to something we talked about before, this one does make the decision that slavery is something that it is not going to tackle.
Yeah.
It's not in it.
Yeah. It's
at all.
not.
Which
they go to Antigua and come home again.
Yeah. That's a problem. It's unfortunate. Like, as we said before, like, if you're going to do Mansfield Park, it kind of sucks to just not tackle it at all.
Yeah.
So even though this ended up being the one we liked the most for different reasons, like I think it gets the characters mostly right.
Well, yeah, sort of by default, it became the one we liked the most.
Yeah, like it gets Fanny right, and it gets a lot of the other characters right, and it gets the story, like it does the story. Like I think it gets the story a little too right, because I didn't like this story all that much. Like I didn't like that the end of the story is just Fanny finding out about all of these different things that happen from other people's letters.
Yeah.
I didn't really appreciate that. And in this one, it's a very faithful adaptation. So Fanny finds out about everything through letters. One thing they do is they actually do show us a lot of the conversations.
Yes.
So that is good.
Yes.
I feel like they didn't quite know what to do with Mary.
Yeah.
I think Mary is a hard character because she's not a villain. We're just not on her side.
Yeah.
Like,
well, she doesn't really have an arc. Like she doesn't really change. She's the same at the beginning as she is in the end. We just find out more about her.
Yeah.
As you say, she's not like a bad person. She's just kind of shallow and not a very serious person and thoughtless, I would say.
And that's what, like, when she writes the letter to Fanny, wherein she says, you know, obviously it wouldn't be good if Tom died, but in some ways it would be really good if Tom died.
Yeah.
The way it's portrayed in the show is like she's kind of arch when she's reading it. Like the way the actress playing Mary reads the letter, like it sounds kind of evil.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't sound like one of these people that's like, Mary strikes me as the kind of person who has managed to go their whole life without people calling them on their shit.
Yes.
And she's not saying it in a way that sounds like that type of person. She's reading it in a way that sounds like someone who's like, I am the villain and I'm going to act like the villain.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen that much. It's only like that and one other scene in it that really made her sound that way. But I feel like they didn't quite figure her out.
Yeah.
In a way that I would have been interested to see.
Yeah, that's fair.
Before we move on, I do want to, we didn't really talk about it before, but I do want to talk about this. It's rough, but if you're going to do Mansfield Park, you've got to just lean into it, and you've got to get those two crazy kids together. Like, you've got to get those two cousins together.
Yeah.
And Fanny and Edmund, of course they get married because they're supposed to, because that's what happens in the book. I feel like the show kind of just does it.
Yeah.
Right? Even though it's gross. It's gross.
It's gross.
It's gross. Like, it's gross. And that is, obviously, we're looking at it through a lens of now, but it is just a little gross. I guess maybe I missed it in the book, but it wasn't as clear to me as I think it was to other people how much Fanny is into Edmund the entire time.
Yeah.
I read their relationship, like, maybe it was because I didn't want them to get together because I knew they were cousins, or I thought, like, how could they possibly get together? Because I didn't know the story. They're first cousins. They couldn't possibly get together. So she was definitely very devoted to him, but I thought it was because she loved him.
Yeah.
Not that she was in love with him.
I see.
What do you think? Like, do you think I was just being naive?
Yes.
Okay, that's fair.
I think it is explicitly textual that she has been in love with him for many years.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And you know what? Now that I'm saying that, I guess there is the thing at the beginning that, like, the whole way that Mrs. Norris convinces the Bertrams to take Fanny
is that if they're raised as siblings, they'll never marry.
Yeah. But if she if she just shows up one day as like a beautiful young woman,
You never know what might happen.
you don't know what's going to happen with your two sons who are her first cousins.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. No, you're right. I needed to talk it through. I'm glad we did this on the show.
Great, fantastic.
Do you wanna
It's
move
always
on?
good when we do this. Yes. 1999.
Theatrical movie written and directed by Patricia Rizima. I never saw it.
Yep.
Had you?
I had seen it.
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah, I must have.
How much of the experience of watching it did you remember?
Oh, very little.
Okay.
Very little. I definitely remembered Beth Davids for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Well, you always knew her because
Matilda.
Yeah.
I feel like this one, and we're going to talk about it. I have like a whole page of notes.
Yes.
In fact, most of my notes come from like the last 25 minutes because it goes a little off the rails at the end. I think this one has a big problem. This is not Fanny Price.
No.
This is a very fun character.
Sure. Oh, yeah. This is Frances O'Connor.
Spunky, smart, beautiful.
Like, as an example, can I read the description of the movie?
Yes.
This is the one that shows up if you rent it anywhere, which is what we did. I feel like our spidey sense was tingling right off the bat, even before we started watching it, because here's the description of the movie. When a spirited young woman, Fanny Price,
she's not spirited.
Immediately, what is going on?
Famously not spirited.
When a spirited young woman, Fanny Price, is sent away to live on the great country estate of her rich cousins, she's meant to learn the ways of proper society.
Yep.
Okay, we're coming back on track.
Okay.
But while Fanny learns their ways, she also enlightens them with a wit and sparkle all her own.
She has no sparkle.
It was just interesting.
Or wit.
It was interesting to read that, having not only read the book, but read the book and fallen in love with this awkward character.
Yes.
I feel like you had a good revelation while we were watching it, because she's not Fanny Price.
She's a different character.
Who is she?
She's Jo March.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's like up in a garret, constantly writing, wearing like masculine inspired clothing.
Mm-hmm.
She looks cute the whole time. She's definitely dressed very differently from her cousins.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of breaking the fourth wall of like, I'm going to look at the camera and tell you about this thing that I'm writing. There's a lot of like, as a child, like showing her like making up stories and telling stories to her little sister. And then the sister becomes the person that she's always writing letters to. So we hear her in voiceover. We get that. William's not in it. Her brother William, which is fine.
So would it surprise you to know that one of the things that writer-director Patricia Rizima was doing was, because she said flatly, like, this is not an adaptation of Mansfield Park. This is not Jane Austen's Mansfield Park. This is my version of Mansfield Park.
Okay.
And she had things she wanted to do.
I can see
so
that.
So one of the things that she did is something that we see constantly in adaptations of Little Women, where people look at the character of Jo March and go, well, Louisa May Alcott, like,
that's her.
Tell me more things about Louisa May Alcott so that I can use them to inspire my telling of this character.
Yes.
Which makes perfect sense.
Yes.
She looked at Jane Austen and said, how are all the ways that I can use Jane Austen's life to inspire the way I portray this character, Fanny Price, in my movie?
Gotcha.
It's the same thing that happens in Little Women, except Fanny Price is not Jane Austen.
Famously not Jane Austen. So are some of the letters to her sister, are those like taken from Jane's letters to her sister Cassandra?
I believe so. And also some of the books she was writing, like that book of the history of England that she was writing over the course of the movie. That was something Jane Austen did.
Sure.
Can I spoil a quick thing, but it's related to this?
Sure.
So in the book, how many times does Henry tell Fanny, I want to marry you?
Twice?
Okay. How many times does Fanny say no?
Every time.
Okay. And in the 1983 TV show, same, right?
Yes.
In this one, though, it's a little different.
Yes.
Because what happens?
She says no many times.
Yep.
And then she says yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then she says no again.
Okay. Jane Austen did that. Specifically, she accepted someone's proposal and then the next day said disaccepted the proposal. She took it as an opportunity to bring Jane Austen to the screen.
Yeah.
The person, in a way that I think she felt other people hadn't really done before.
Yeah. Well, I can see that.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about it. I don't feel great about it. However, maybe I would feel better about it if I felt like this movie was more successful.
Yes.
Which
that's the rub.
That is, as they say, the rub. Okay. So do you want me to? I'm just gonna run through some of my notes.
Yeah, sure.
There was one laugh out loud cut that I'm just going to mention because we thought it was extremely funny. I mean, I think she's a good filmmaker. The movie is beautiful.
Like, can I say this really quick?
Yeah.
This was a good movie.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like it, and I don't think it's a good adaptation of Mansfield Park, but like, It's a strong movie. The script is strong. The characters are funny. The lines are funny.
The costumes are gorgeous.
Yeah, like the characters are so well defined. Like she zips through the plot like crazy,
Yeah.
but in a way that I think is really economical and makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of really, really strong choices. Like this is not one of those things where, we're sitting here saying that this movie is not good.
Yeah, and some of the casting is really amazing too, which I'm going to come to in a second.
Sure.
I just want to talk about that one cut that we thought was so funny. Right at the beginning, she's really trying to get through a bunch of plot really quickly, and she's like explaining like how all the different like she marries Mariah off immediately. Mariah is like gone. Sir Thomas is at Antigua immediately, and then it's like this cut of like Mrs. Norris's husband died, and it just cuts to him like having a heart attack and falling into a soup, and it was one of the funniest things I've ever. It was like one of the funniest cuts I've ever seen.
Well, and then it cuts directly to Mrs. Norris like just ringing the little bell to get some help.
Yeah, it was really good.
It's very overt. I mean, you talked about her like breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah.
It actually, that is a thing that I am so glad the movie did, and I wish more adaptations would do that, because I think it's one of the problems that I have, like, anytime you're trying to cinematically show letter writing.
Yeah.
It's hard to do, because what are you going to do? Like, you're going to have Fanny sit down and pick up a letter from somebody, and then you're going to hear that person's voice, and maybe you'll cut to something happening from the letter. But in this, it's like, no, letters were a conversation. Like, there were no phone calls. It was letters. Everyone was writing letters to each other all the time. I really like the fact that, like, the way Fanny writes letters to Susan is that she's having a conversation with her.
Yeah.
So every letter is her staring right down the barrel of the camera, talking to Susan.
Yeah.
She's not talking to the audience. She's talking to Susan. Like, I loved that choice. I think it's fantastic.
So the costumes, like I said, I thought were very beautiful to look at. She has this like red velvet coat when she goes home to Portsmouth that I just like coveted. I thought it was so beautiful. However, I will say there's a lot of loose hair, and there's a lot of smoky eye, and there's a lot of lip gloss, and there's a lot of apple cheek blush in this movie. It is a very modern from the neck up situation. So I felt that was like a little distracting. I mean, I think that the filmmaker was trying to do a lot and had a lot to say.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that she definitely wanted to do was show the ways that women are disadvantaged by men in ways that are dangerous, and not in like frothy like marriage plot ways, but in like scarier ways. Because, I mean, I think when you cast Harold Pinter as Sir Thomas, you are not casting someone that you want the audience to like.
Yeah.
And so, like there's a reason that she cast Harold Pinter. Like, he is so dark as Sir Thomas. And I think, I mean, this was what I expressed to you. What I took away from it was that she was not trying to have a situation where you, the audience, have sympathy for someone who owns enslaved persons, right? Like, she does not want that to be a good person, and that's not a good person, and we shouldn't like him.
Yeah, like we're on board,
and I'm on board with that.
Yeah.
Like, if that's what you're trying to say with your movie, is like, this character's pretty sympathetic, and he turns out to be kind of a good guy and like a good uncle to her, and like kind of comes around by the end to like what a good person Fanny is. But I want to talk about the slave trade, and this is a person that deals in enslaved people. And thus that person cannot be sympathetic. I'm on board. That is fine. Like, if that's where that choice comes from, I'm okay with losing the part where I like her likable uncle.
Yeah, there's
that's okay with me.
There's a part in the book that I really enjoyed. It's when she thinks that no one likes her, and she thinks Sir Thomas doesn't like her, and he finally gets back from Antigua, and his reaction to seeing her is so heartwarming, and it makes her so happy.
Yeah.
And it's a really, really nice part of the book. But yeah, if we have to give up that really nice moment because someone is saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't like this guy because he buys and sells people.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with it. And there's a part where he comes back from Antigua, and he's like talking in very disgusting terms about the people there. And Edmund, and I won't even repeat what he says because it's gross, but like at one point
He's
Edmund,
just deeply, deeply racist.
deeply, deeply disgusting. And at one point Edmund is like, you can't say that. That is not true and awful. And he just kind of like stares him down. And I said to you, oh, this man is taking advantage of these women sexually.
Mhm.
Like we are to understand that from the scene, because he's just talking. He's like, oh, there was this very beautiful woman that I was thinking about bringing back as a housekeeper, and I decided not to. And I was like, oh. And then at the end, it becomes explicit that that is what he was doing, and we kind of learn that part of the reason Tom is sort of driven to brain fever is how disgusted he is with all the things that he saw there and the things that he saw his father doing. And Fanny finds these like drawings that he's made of like the horrible things that are going on over on this, like, I don't know, sugar plantation or whatever it may be in Antigua. And Sir Thomas finds her looking at these sketches that Tom has made, and he's terrifying. Like, and he throws him in the fire. And then, like, we kind of see him have this change of heart. In my opinion, I think what we're meant to understand from this sort of monologue that he has about, like, Tom always wanted, it was heartbreaking. It was actually a beautiful monologue about his son. Like, I mean, come on, it's Harold Pinter, but like as a little boy, he always wanted a noble job to do. He would say, Father, give me a job to do, but let it be a noble job. And that he felt like he had not acted nobly in the eyes of his son. And so they do say at the end, like, he gave up his interest there, but he went off and did some other terrible thing. Like, well, no, he's not a good person.
He got involved in tobacco.
Yeah, right.
Which, like, is also that's also not great.
No, it's also bad. Like,
yes.
like I think that was the joke. Like, that was the point.
Yeah.
Like, it's also bad.
But it's treated as a joke.
Yes, it is treated as a joke. Everything I just said, like, if that's something you want to put into Mansfield Park because you're like, look, we got to talk about it, I'm actually fine with it.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't really have much of a problem narratively. I certainly didn't have a problem morally, but I didn't have much of a problem narratively with any of the stuff that I just mentioned. It's just she's trying to do a lot, and that would have been a lot by itself, and she's trying to do a bunch more stuff too.
I feel like narratively it never connects with the story of the main characters.
That's right.
Like, Fanny is the main character, and I just never feel like it connects.
Yeah.
I don't feel like there's anything about the end of Fanny's story that has anything to do with any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So we get some opportunities to see that, oh, Fanny is against it.
Fanny asked him a question one time that he wasn't super happy about having to answer.
But she pushed on it.
Yeah.
Because this is not the Fanny from the book. This is Fanny who is not awkward at all and is going to speak her mind and is very well spoken and confident in front of people. Like, it doesn't affect her journey at all. It doesn't affect her story at all. It's just a thing
really
for us. For us as the audience, we're like, okay, so it is a bit, they are going to acknowledge the fact that slavery is a big thing here. We do see that Fanny's not in favor of it. Oh, that makes me feel better as an audience member to know that the main character that I like is against it.
Yeah.
That's really all it's there for. And I feel like if it's going to occasionally get into the idea that, like, no, slavery affects real people in a really awful way.
Yeah.
Like, the scene where she's looking through the sketchbook really gets at that.
Yeah.
Like, this is real. This is a real thing that really affects these people.
It was very intense.
Very, very intense. But nothing really comes of it.
Yeah, and not for nothing, you pointed out not a person of color in this movie.
Not a single one.
Literally not a single one. Not in the background, not anywhere.
Well, there is that one moment at the beginning that's kind of weird. And I feel weird criticizing it because if it was something that was important for the filmmakers to do, there's not that many other opportunities for it unless you want to actually show Sir Thomas in Antigua. But when young Fanny is in the coach being brought to Mansfield, they stop on the coast, and there is a ship full of enslaved people.
Yeah.
The problem is that historically that's inaccurate because they weren't...
Yeah, there was no slave trade.
Yeah, they weren't...
England.
The boats of people were not going to England.
No.
So it's historically very inaccurate.
Yeah.
The only reason it's there is because the filmmaker wants to show you, the audience, that, like, no, we are dealing with it. So you hear the wailing of the people in the boat. You never see them, though.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a problem.
Yeah.
To, like, it's so heavy-handed, and I think the movie thinks so highly of itself, and it's just patting itself on the back.
Yeah, that's what you're using the story of something real that happened to real people to make a point in your Jane Austen marriage comedy.
Yeah.
You know? Like, I don't know that that's great either.
And there's a song that plays over the end credits that, like, I think the translated title of it is Slavery.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's very...
a good song.
It was fine, but, like, it never connected with anything in the movie.
Yeah, there was no connection to anything in the movie.
I almost would have appreciated it more if she had just said, like, no, we are going to make it about this. And you know what? Fanny is getting on a boat and she's going to Antigua.
Fuck your Fanny Price. We're talking about,
like,
this is Amistad now.
We're going to Antigua. Yeah. Like, I would have been more okay with that.
Oh.
But it is better than pretending it didn't exist.
Yeah, sure. 100%.
Can we talk about casting for a minute?
Yeah.
You've already mentioned Harold Pinter. We talked about Frances O'Connor a little bit, but I kind of want to run through a lot of the people in the cast just for a moment, because the movie starts with Hannah Taylor-Gordon as young Fanny, who we've seen
in tons of stuff,
in a bunch of things.
Yeah.
She was in like that TV version of the Ten Commandments.
Oh my God,
that popped up, but she's been in a number of things.
Yeah. She's like a very recognizable child actor.
Yeah, and was quite good.
Yes,
she's quite good. Looks nothing like Frances O'Connor.
Absolutely nothing
at all.
No.
But like, she was quite good. One of the cool things, we didn't even mention this in the '83 version because I tried everything I could to see if I could even recognize him, but apparently one of Fanny's little brothers in '83 was Johnny Lee Miller, who is Edmund in this version.
Yep.
Which is neat that he got to be in both of them.
Fun.
I still don't know which younger brother he was because they all just look like little kids.
Yep.
He's really good, though.
I have no problem with him.
Yeah, I liked him in Emma more. I feel like he had more to do in that, and he's a little bit older in that one. I just liked that one better.
Yeah.
Because he's in the Romola Garai one, right?
Yeah, I think so.
An actor I always like seeing, James Purefoy as Tom Bertram.
Yep.
I think he does a really good job as Tom. Yeah. He is very aggressive.
Oh, yeah.
Because the movie like dials all the characters up to 11.
Oh, yeah.
Like he's
just drunk constantly.
Just drunk all the time.
Just constantly drunk.
Constantly drunk. You mentioned Embeth Davidtz before.
Yep.
She plays Mary Crawford.
Yep.
She gets top billing in this too.
Well, yeah.
Like Frances O'Connor, fourth billing in her own movie.
There you go. All the more reason to understand it's not about Fanny Price.
Yeah, and I think Embeth Davidtz is very good in this, as she is very good in everything. But Alessandro Nivola as Henry, you made a comment about him while we were watching it.
I just said, talk about like, I believe what I said was, this is what Henry looks like.
Yeah.
Like he's kind of short, but handsome, but not too handsome, but charming, and has nice hair and very specific facial hair.
Yep. He's they definitely go a little more arch. I feel like this Henry and Mary are even a little more arch than Henry and Mary in the '83 version.
Yeah.
And then spoiler alert, they get even more arch in the 2007 version.
Yeah.
But I think Embeth Davidtz and Alessandro Nivola are both very good in this.
They're very good.
They did a cool thing with Lady Bertram where the actress Lindsay Duncan plays her, but the same actor also plays Mrs. Price,
yes,
Fanny's mother, and they have her done up very differently.
Very differently.
I don't really have anything to say about her other than I think the casting is interesting.
I think Lindsay Duncan found a balance that. So if Angela Pleasance was completely out there
and divorced from reality,
not to spoil anything, but I think the acting in the 2007 version of Lady Bertram, who's the actor's name I can't remember, but
it's Gemma Redgrave.
Oh, Gemma Redgrave. She was way too aware of what was going on. She was almost like the omniscient narrator. Like she was very engaged.
Just totally normal.
Like this was like
just complicit.
I think she found the right balance of like not too weird, but also kind of airheaded, which is what Lady Bertram should be.
And I was just going to mention two other people really quickly. Sheila Gish as Mrs. Norris is very good.
Yeah.
She's a very good Mrs. Norris. And Hugh Bonneville as Mr. Rushworth.
Oh man, the role he was born to play.
Oh, he's so good.
There's a couple of really perfect casting choices in this.
And I feel like this kind of made me feel a little bit better about Yates's hair in the '83 version, because Rushworth's hair in this one looked a lot like what I think they were going for in that one.
And I think we pointed it out. It was like a similar style. We're like, okay, I think this is what they were trying to do.
Yeah. I just think in terms of casting, I think everyone showed up. It's a really well cast movie and the acting is all really good.
Yeah.
The question that I think we have is more about like, what was the filmmaker's intention?
Yeah, I mean, Embeth Davidtz does have to deliver the line, "This is 1806 for heaven's sake."
Yeah.
In her argument as to why they should accept Mariah back into their home, and I just hate that kind of self-aware, like it's like making fun of the character almost.
Yes.
Their naivete of like, oh, it's 1806. They think it's modern. Isn't that funny? I dislike it. Took me out of it. And I didn't think it fit with the rest of it put into stark contrast the fact that I thought the rest of the script was actually pretty good, and the way that everybody talked to each other was internally consistent.
Yes.
And then you have someone bust out with a line like, "This is 1806 for heaven's sake," which did not fit and was not good. There is some gratuitous nudity, I would say.
You thought it was gratuitous?
I mean, I didn't need to see Mariah's boobs. I didn't, or Henry Crawford's butt. Like, I didn't need to see either of those things. I didn't need to see any of the three of those things. Did you feel like Henry Crawford's butt added anything to the situation?
Okay, so this is now we're getting to the third act.
Yeah. Well, that's where all my notes are because
Yeah.
I did feel like it got a little unhinged in the third act.
So none of this should have surprised us
Yeah.
because the first half of it was just cut, get through it as fast as you can.
The play was like 15 seconds.
Yeah, in a way that I actually thought, I think it worked more than it didn't work.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit here and say that it didn't work.
Yes, and I remember saying to you, the fact that they're moving all through this so quickly makes me nervous about where this movie is going to choose to spend its time.
Yeah.
I remember saying that.
So, one of the things that it unsurprisingly chooses to do is that rather than have Fanny find out about all of these things through letters, Fanny's present for a lot more of this.
Yeah.
Does she even get a letter about Tom? Or Edmund just shows up?
No, I think he just shows up and
Yeah.
everybody's there.
Like, Edmund just shows up and said, Fanny, you've got to come back with me. Tom's sick.
Yeah.
In the book, where like she's getting a letter about Tom and then gets letters about everything else, he immediately brings her home. So she is back in Mansfield. And then the other thing that happens in front of everyone, in front of Fanny in particular,
in front of God and everyone.
because is Fanny the one that catches them, or is
Yeah.
Edmund the one that?
Fanny catches them.
Yes.
She goes into Edmund. He's like, what happened? She can't even speak. So he goes and looks, and they're
Right.
still just like standing there naked.
Yeah. So she goes in and she catches Henry and Mariah in bed together.
In flagrante delicto.
Yes. So all the boobs and butts are out, as you said it.
I did
believe
say
that's
it.
a direct quote.
Yes.
So, like, yeah, if what you're trying to do is up the stakes and make it make a little more sense to a modern audience, yeah,
Yeah, why not?
like sure.
Sure.
I'm not against it. You ask me if I thought it should have been there.
Yeah.
Like, I guess what I'm saying is I liked it.
I found it unpalatable.
I liked it in terms of what it was doing for the story.
Sure.
I thought that made sense. But then I feel like the movie went too far because so much of what's happening after that ends up reducing Fanny's importance as a character.
Yeah.
So like another thing that she witnesses is this So Edmund has a conversation with Mary wherein she says, hey, it would be great if Tom died. And he writes a letter to Fanny saying, she said this and that's terrible.
Yeah.
And I don't love her anymore.
Yeah.
And Mary also writes a letter to Fanny saying, hey, it would be really great if Tom died.
and Fanny's like, that's a terrible thing to say.
Terrible thing to say. In this, it's all changed to a scene where it's one conversation happening between every member of the family.
Everyone in the room together, 8 people, including Tom's like grieving, were anxious parents. Mary stands up and is like, hey, wouldn't it be great if he died?
Yeah, and she like walks around the room
Yeah.
giving everyone this plan for how they're going to get Mariah and Henry back into their life. And if Tom died, then obviously I would marry Edmund. She's doing it in front of everyone. And so, yes, from a standpoint of let's streamline things, it makes sense that would change. But I think it ruins more than it fixes.
Yeah.
Because now Fanny's like present,
Yeah.
but it's not her story anymore.
Yeah.
Like how the way she feels about it is absolutely not as bad as the way everyone else feels about hearing this. So we're not even thinking about Fanny, our main character at that
right.
point.
We're like, his parents are right there. His
Yeah.
brother and his sister,
And-
everyone.
And by the way, like this scene is telling me I should feel bad for Sir Thomas, but
I
also the
don't.
entire time you've been telling me that he's the last person I should feel bad about.
Yeah.
I think the movie is confused.
Can I talk about the proposal scene
Sure.
at the end? Because it gave me a lot of
Which proposal scene?
the Fanny and Edmund proposal scene.
Sure.
All this has taken place. The Crawfords are gone away and everyone is disgraced and Tom's feeling better and Edmund's not into Mary anymore. And Fanny's up in her garret writing her stories with Edmund like she always used to do, like for her whole life, how she always used to do.
Yeah,
And they're
just
all-
like Joe and Laura used to
Just
do.
how Joe and Laura used to do. And they're sitting there and he's like, Fanny, I really love you. And she's like, oh, cousin, I love you too. And he's like, no. And we go, oh, no. Because no, I love you in a different way. I love you as a man loves a woman. And I turn to you and I go, oh, as a first cousin loves a first cousin who's grown up with him as a sister. Yes, that way.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
I don't like it either.
I don't like it. I don't like it. Don't dwell on how they love each other. Don't dwell on it because it's gross. All right. We've spent a good long time on this. Is there anything else that you wanted to say?
No, this movie is confused. That's my big problem with it. Like, I don't think it's confusing. I think it's very straightforward. I think it is confused. I think it's trying to be too many things, and unfortunately, I don't think it ultimately succeeds at most of the things it's trying to do.
Yeah.
And that's a shame. Because as you say, we were picking up a lot of the stuff it was putting down.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right, let's move on to 2007, which we've already talked about
Yeah.
a whole bunch
This
up until now.
may not need
TV movie directed by Ian B. McDonald, written by Maggie Wadey, starring Billy Piper as Fanny Price. A number of other people we've seen before at different times. James Darcy, who we've talked about before, plays Thomas. Blake Ritson plays Edmund. He played Mr. Elton in, I think, also the Romola Garai Emma.
Maybe, yes.
I think so.
Possibly.
The timing, I think, would have been the same because it was around at about the same time. Haley Atwell
Yep.
is Mary Crawford.
Yep.
She's very good. Rory Kinnear as Mr. Rushworth.
Yep.
Playing a very good Mr. Rushworth in the 2 minutes that he's on
not in it
screen.
Who's Sir Thomas? I thought he was not terrible.
Douglas Hodge.
Yes.
I have this weird thing about Douglas Hodge. Maybe I just don't get Douglas Hodge as an actor because I've seen him in a number of things before. I've never felt that he's very good.
Gotcha.
I don't quite know what was happening in this one.
That's fair. Let's talk about this.
Okay.
So we went to sit down to watch this.
Yes.
And I think I said to you, I have seen this before. I just want you to know, general consensus is it's not very good.
I was like, okay, let's do this.
Yes. It is, I think, worse than I remembered. Because I think I definitely saw it when I came. Like, I was a watcher of Masterpiece Theater when this came out in 2007. So I'm pretty sure I saw it, like, when it was on television. And remember thinking at the time that it was, like, not amazing. I mean, it's hard to do Jane Austen in an hour and a half. So they had to let a lot of stuff go.
Yes.
Portsmouth is not in it at all.
This gets to another thing that I wanted to talk about that we kind of mentioned before, that, like, if 1983 was done for very little money, this was done for no money.
No money.
I feel like the choices that they make are not about time. The choices they make are about whether they can afford to do it.
Yeah, you don't want the fact that, like, you couldn't afford to rent a ballroom to be... You don't want the cheapness of the production, I think, to be as obvious on camera as I think this was.
Yeah.
I definitely recognized a number of costumes from other Jane Austen adaptations, which is fine. Like, that's not a problem.
No.
I actually think that's fun. But, like, if there's a scene where you're supposed to be giving a ball and someone's like, a ball, you say, how about a picnic instead?
Yeah, Fanny says, no, I want a picnic.
And so we're like, a picnic? Why a picnic? What are we doing? What are we picnicking for? And then the next thing they're like, this picnic. Sir Thomas has invited half the county to this picnic. And then we go to the picnic. Again, this is now 5 minutes later. This all happens very quick. There's 17 people on the lawn. Like,
most of whom we've already met.
And I was like, is it a very small county? Because this
exceptionally small.
This is half the county. So what you said was, they couldn't afford to rent any of the interior shots of this house that they're at.
They clearly had access to some of the rooms at the house, but they didn't have access to the ballroom at the house.
Because both
or anything that could be a ballroom.
Or anything could be a ballroom or a church. Because at the end, when they do the wedding, they're just out on the same lawn.
On the same lawn.
Just the same lawn.
Anytime,
the same people.
Yep. Anytime no, it's more people.
It's somehow got more people.
The
whole
entire county came to the wedding.
Yeah, like maybe 2 counties.
But the other decision they make, and I cannot imagine this was a timing decision. I think this was absolutely a money decision. As you say, she never goes to Portsmouth.
Never goes.
Instead, everybody else leaves Mansfield.
Well, I want to come to that in a minute.
Okay.
I just have a few smaller gripes.
Sure.
And then we can talk to everyone else leaves Mansfield, because I really think it, like, kind of sums up just exactly what you were saying of, like, we want to make this modern, so let's just do what the hell we want. It doesn't matter that it's Jane Austen times. We have Fanny's voiceover, which I find is not necessary, but you probably need it if you're trying to do Mansfield Park in 90 minutes or less.
Mm-hmm.
But right from the beginning, voiceover Fanny, I came to love him as more than a cousin. Like, God damn it. And we watched both of these in one day.
Yeah.
So we had just seen, the way a first cousin loves a first cousin. So we were already grossed out. Oh, and the other thing about the picnic, very clearly they're on the lawn, they've got one fiddle player, because that's what they have. And then everyone starts to dance, and suddenly there's lush orchestral music.
I feel like the music was, I can't believe I'm defending this movie. I feel like the music was so lush that it clearly was trying to communicate that this was the music that they were hearing in their hearts.
It was non-diegetic is what you're saying.
Yes.
I also felt that the hair in this film was some of the worst Jane Austen hair I've ever seen. I wrote down, why the stringy hair? And then I wrote stupid Mariah and her stupid hair. Mariah's hair was like up in a bun, but she had these like two little...
Payas?
Yeah, but they were straight. Fanny's hair was like down in perfect curls the whole time, but like shoulder length, that was not a style in 1810. Like shoulder, like a shoulder length curly bob with bangs. And then, yeah, like the other girls had like their hair up in a bun, but because it's 2007, you have to have like the little long bangs in front that you like pull out of the ponytail, and it looked very stupid. Not even like, oh, it's not accurate for the time. It was just, I just hated
Something's always looked bad.
I just hated everyone's hair. It was very 2007 hair.
I thought Haley Atwell had nice hair.
Her hair was fine. It was in sort of a loose bun. She did have sort of the tendrils coming down.
She did.
But it wasn't as exaggerated as in Mariah's case. It was not, however, period accurate in any way.
I mean, I thought of Blake Ritson's hair a lot as Edmund, where like it was exceptionally modern.
Yeah, he had sort of a George Clooney Caesar cut thing going on.
No, I thought it was longer than it looked like emo. Like
yeah,
it looked like a very emo hair.
Yeah, it was very emo hair. It was like sort of spiky bangs.
Yeah.
I did like the part. Yeah, God, this whole thing was made for like I didn't think any care was taken with the script to like bring the audience in to inhabit the world of Jane Austen. There was one point, I'm sorry, I'm getting all my gripes out at once.
Sure.
William's there visiting. Oh, William does like dances a hornpipe at one point and it's stupid. But it just looks really
Everyone comes for our very measured and detailed criticism.
Well, in the book, I don't know if you remember, but in the book, it was this whole thing about how if you're a lieutenant, you're never allowed to wear your uniform except where you're on board the ship. Like, that's the etiquette. And there he is, like, in his full uniform, like, dancing a jig at the picnic.
Not only wearing his uniform, looking like an idiot in his uniform.
They're like, so William's visiting. Mariah and Julia are, like, not there. And someone says, oh, it's Fanny's birthday tomorrow. And Sir Thomas goes, oh, Fanny, it's your birthday. We really need to celebrate this. We'll have a ball since it's William's last day. And I was like, can you throw a ball in 24 hours? I really don't think you can. You can't even throw a picnic. For someone to say, let's have a ball tomorrow that we never thought about until this moment in time. Like, the invitations, they don't have email. They don't have e-cards or evites or paperless post. Like, the invitations could not even get to the guests in time for the ball. Anyway, sorry. Did you have anything you wanted to say?
I want to talk about characterization a little bit.
Okay.
I'll start with Mary and Henry. I've been thinking, and I already said this before kind of, but I'll say it a little more clearly. Like, I think that Mansfield Park would be a great story to adapt, like Clueless, into like a high school story. I think it would work beautifully because so many of the relationships are very immature, very high school. I think the drama of love in high school matches the drama of love in this story.
Yeah, and I can see a situation where you could have in a very modern way, have like a cousin coming to stay with her rich family and going to high school with the sons and daughters.
But also we'd have to come up with something else. They are not related. I'm so sorry.
Oh, right. Yeah, obviously. Exchange student. I don't know.
Yeah. But also, no, and if you change it enough, you could also have a version where Fanny doesn't end up with Edmund at the end.
Yeah.
Which I'd actually be totally fine with.
Or you could have a version where it's a blended family and she's the niece of the mom, but is totally unrelated to the boy. Like
there's a lot of ways you could handle it. I think it is ripe for that type of adaptation. But what I don't think you can do is just act like you're doing that kind of adaptation, but still have everybody look like it's Jane Austen time.
Yeah.
Because that's Mary and Henry in this.
Right.
They are just evil villains from a John Hughes movie.
Yeah.
That's what they felt like. Like they are scheming the entire time they're on screen about how they're going to. And like, yes, I understand that's a reading of those characters from the book.
Yeah.
But I don't think it actually works.
No, it's like, well, which one are you going to marry? Oh, I don't know. Which one are you going to marry? Oh, I don't know. Like, it's very...
Well, this one, I'm going to go after this one, but then I also may go after this one, but I may have this one on the side.
And maybe this one, and maybe this one will die.
Yeah, they are too arch.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me. Like it made it made 99 feel less arch, which also made 1983 feel less arch.
Yeah.
So looking back at 83, it's like
So
they
that's not that
they
bad.
were pretty normal. Whereas at the time we were watching it, I was like, they're too overt.
Yeah.
This doesn't work. I didn't know how bad it would get.
Yeah.
And then I want to say one other thing about characterization, because we could talk about everybody, but I want to talk about Fanny.
Great.
1983, I think, gets the character pretty well. 1999 makes her a different character.
Yes.
I feel like this one decided to dispense with her being a character. Like, I don't think she's a character.
Yeah.
She's present.
Yeah.
And things happen to her.
Yeah.
But we have no sense of what she wants. She never takes action about anything.
Yeah.
Action or inaction. And that's not characterization.
Yeah, well, you really lose something by not sending her to Portsmouth, because I really actually feel like that is an important part of the story for her character, when she learns that she is strong and people can depend on her,
Mhm.
and she's, you know, like, that's actually important for her as a character to go to Portsmouth. In addition to the fact that it makes her unhappy to be there, the way that she becomes a capable human being, I think, is, like I said, important for her character. So.
Yeah. But I don't think they had any idea who she is. I had no clue. I don't think, like, I don't know who she is or what she's like. I don't think they knew.
Yeah, I guess, you know, the thing that I would mention that I think we were going to try to circle back to is, like, as you say, you've written a story that takes place in Jane Austen times, but the screenwriter clearly did not have any compunction to make things operate in the way that they would have operated in that time.
Mm-hmm.
And because, like, again, the budget constraints of this are
Visible.
overt.
Yeah.
So they don't have any other locations that they're able to use.
Well, it's
And
called
so-
Mansfield Park. Why would you need to go anywhere else?
Well, so instead of sending Fanny away, her punishment, air quotes, Sir Thomas is like, so we're going to punish Fanny by, when we go away for the next 3 weeks to visit your mother, we're just going to leave her here. And Lady Bertram's like, oh, okay, that sounds fine. Couple things about that. A, this is basically like the punishment when you're a kid and your dad sends you to your room and you're like, I want to go to my room. All my stuff is there and I don't have to talk to you. This is amazing. She just gets the whole house to herself and just gets to do whatever she wants and, like, read and hang out, and no one's there, like, yelling at her and putting upon her and, like, making her sit in a room without a fireplace. Like, that's amazing. That's not a punishment. Fanny loves this.
Mm-hmm.
And then B, I was like, surely this is improper for her to be there just, like, completely by herself. Like,
Yeah.
I cannot believe that it would be proper for an 18-year-old girl just to, like, be living in this house completely on her own. Then Henry shows up and I was like, surely this is improper.
Yeah.
Do you remember in Sense
Yes.
I said to you, do you remember in Sense and Sensibility where Willoughby takes Marianne, like, to his house and walks all over the house with her and shows her the house, and it's so scandalous because they're there by themselves.
Mhm.
She's not supposed to be by herself in an empty house with Henry Crawford, but because it is expedient to the script that she has to be. I didn't like it, and it took me out of the story, and I would go so far as to say I am not sure this adaptation has any redeeming value. I did not think it was Mansfield Park, even a little.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Was there anything else you wanted to say? Because I also wanted to read my last note on my page that I am not sure what I was referring to, but I put it in all caps, so it must have been important at the time.
I see what your note is, and I think I might know. In fact, I think it's the thing I want to talk
Okay,
about.
go ahead. I do remember.
Yeah. I want to paint a picture really quickly for people. Like, imagine everyone's seen this in a TV show or a movie at some point where, like, something heavy falls on a character and they have to act like it's really heavy. But of course, it's not really heavy, because if it was, that would be unsafe.
Yes.
But if it's clearly not heavy, then the actor is just kind of, like, pretending that they're trapped. But, like, sometimes you can tell
Right.
that they are not trapped.
Right.
It's one of these things where, like, if they had the time or the inclination, they would have come up with a way to make it work.
Yes.
But instead, what ends up happening, it's usually a TV show because they have to do them really quick. Usually what ends up happening is the conversation must have happened where someone's like, it doesn't look very convincing. And they're like, that's okay because we got to move on to other stuff. So just do it and we'll get past it.
Isn't that actually what happened at the end of Howard's End when the bookshelf falls on that guy and we were laughing because it did not look realistic at all?
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. The reason I bring that up is because they do something at the end that is like the emotional equivalent of that.
Yeah.
We've reached the end of the story. everything has been tied up except those two crazy cousins.
Yes.
We got to get those two kids together.
We've got to get those two kissing cousins to kiss.
Okay. Everything else has been tied up. So they're just back at the house. It's like Mariah and Julia, Julia's off. Julia married. Well, I don't think Yates is in this one.
I don't think Yates is
I think
in it.
Yates got cut.
Yeah.
It's just Sir Thomas, Lady Bertram, Edmund, and Fanny in the house together. And this thing happens where like suddenly it becomes very important to Edmund that he tells Fanny how he feels and runs after her. And so we get this sequence where they're constantly running in and out of rooms to try to like catch each other.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that they're going to do.
Yeah.
So there's no resistance to them running any. There's no reason for them to run.
No, they live together. They could just stand still and speak.
Like
they
Fanny goes outside and he like races after her.
Well, they sort of have this scene the night before where they have this sort of closeness, and it seems like they have sort of almost but not quite confessed their love for each other. And then the next morning at breakfast, they're just like they're so antsy. They're like desperate to get out of the room. And Fanny's like, I'm gonna go for a walk. And Edmund's like, I'll go with you. Oh no, and Lady, for whatever reason that this movie has chosen that Lady Bertram is completely aware that all of this is happening and is trying to facilitate it. So she's like, Fanny, can you go cut some lavender for me? And Fanny's like, yes, here I go. I'm getting the scissors. Edmund, help me. And Edmund's like, yes. And Sir Thomas is like, actually, Edmund, I had something that I needed you to help me with around the house. And Lady Bertram's like, shh, let him go. Let him go. And they're like, zoom out of the room together. And they're running for like just enough time for Sir Thomas to be like, what's going on? And Lady Bertram to go, oh, didn't you know, my dear, Fanny's been in love with him forever. And now he's in love with her. And they're going to go propose marriage. And then at that moment, they come back like walking hand in hand. Like, we don't even really like see the proposal. They're just like walking. So anyway, I wrote in all caps, they're full of passions.
Like the thing that defines these people's lives is that it's a leisurely life.
Yeah.
There's no reason to go running around.
They gotta run for their passions.
You said it already. There's nothing redeeming in this one.
It wasn't good.
I could probably find a couple of things if I really needed to.
It really wasn't good.
All right.
I'm sorry. It wasn't good. All right. Let's wrap this up.
I mean, I'm worried that this is what's going to happen when we keep looking at Jane Austen? I'm excited about Persuasion.
Yeah.
Not that, because I have heard that the new one is
not good.
batshit.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Sometimes we like things that everybody else hates.
We've got to catch them all.
Yeah. All right. Let's do it.
Do you want to do some quadrants?
Yes.
Okay. 1983. Do you think they cared about the source material?
Yeah. I do.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it was successful?
Honestly?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I agree with that.
Yes.
Like it was a fine production.
It was a fine production.
It was a fine production.
Yes.
1999. Do you think that Patricia Rozema cared about the source material?
I mean, famously not. Like you said that she didn't really care about Mansfield Park. She just wanted to talk about Jane Austen.
Yeah, which that's not nothing.
I mean, I guess no.
But
yes.
no, I don't think. I think that's a no on caring about Mansfield Park.
Yeah.
Even though this is one of those ones where it's like, it's weird because the answer's no, but it doesn't mean that she didn't care about anything.
She cared about something.
Yes.
But we've seen this before. It's like you cared about something, but it wasn't this.
Yes. Was it successful?
As an adaptation of the book Mansfield Park by Jane Austen, it was not successful.
Was it successful as a movie?
It wasn't too bad. It was okay.
It was okay. I did not like it.
Yeah.
2007. Do you think they cared about the source material?
Fuck that. No.
But was it successful?
No.
Also no.
Also no.
Well, this has been Adapt or Perish. If you'd like to find us online, we're on Facebook and Instagram at AdaptCast. You can join our groups on Facebook and Goodreads, and you can also find and follow me on Letterboxd. If you have any feedback to give us, you can always send an email to adaptorperishcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, there are 3 great ways you can do it. First, tell a friend. Second, a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice would be greatly appreciated. Third, we are on Patreon. This show will always be free, but if you become a patron, you can get access to Adapt or Perish Plus, our bonus show that releases between episodes of this show, and our patron-only Slack community. It's a lot of fun, and all the details are at patreon.com/adaptcast.
This is 1806, for heaven's sake.
You're right, it is bullshit.
Yeah, it was bullshit. That was one of my 2 and 40 speeches.